Hi there, this is Ronnie, Amber's Night, coming at you with, well, a redo of a video. I did do a video on this subject, but it seems the sound cut out about halfway through, so I'm redoing it now. And it's really a video throwing my tuppence in on the ongoing debate between old school games and modern games. Um, there seems to be a lot of people prefer modern games, people prefer old school games, and where do I lie on that? Um, I just prefer good games. I think there are some fantastic games that were made in them olden days, um, and I like a lot of the current modern games as well. I think ultimately the question isn't clear cut. I don't think there is a definitive answer. There is only the answer that suits the individual person. I think that's kind of where the debate. I don't know whether it's missing the point or whether the point is kind of getting lost. Um, there are people who don't like the, shall we say, the loose uh, rules that go with old school gaming. That the games don't have a rule for everything. There isn't. There's a lot of grey area in the rules because it's a skeletal structure. If you look at games like basic D&D and some of the retro clones that are out there, you have the base skeleton of a rule system, but the meat of it is pretty much the GM's to add. There will be times when the rules simply can't cover everything. On the flip side, you have a lot of modern games which really do have a rule for everything. Pretty much 99% of every possible eventuality has been foreseen and is down in the rules. Personal opinion. I like games that are rules light. I have never had a problem, possibly because I grew up using rules light games, using old school games. Because I grew up, I've been GMing now since '85. Playing and GMing since '85. So for me, I learned very quickly to think on my feet, to come up with a judgment call on HIF without having to look through a book. It's a style that suits me. I tend to be, for most of my games, my horror games not so much, I'm very in your face as a horror GM, but for most of my games, particularly games like Castle Falkenstein, which I run very much as a high fantasy swashbuckler, I like to be a light touch GM, and as such, I find too many rules get in the way. I think it can be faster just to come up with something on the cuff. Yes, you have to be consistent. I would say that consistency can be factored into the drama of a situation. But ultimately, as long as you're consistent with your rules, and yes, I do accept that you do an awful lot of house ruling with old school games, then that's fine. It's just the way I work. I prefer them. I don't think modern games are lesser than, they're just different to me. They're different, they're not lesser, and I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. I know there are people on this, in amongst the RPG brigade, who are very much, they prefer the modern games, it works for them. I don't think old school is lesser than for them. I really don't. I think it's just a preferred thing. So as much as I'm going to title this about old school versus modern RPGs, I don't think they actually are in competition with each other. I don't think they should be. I think as a hobby, we get enough people shooting us down without shooting at each other for which rule system we use. We use the rules that work. I've mentioned this in a couple other videos. A friend of mine friends of mine actually, husband and wife, and the main game that they actually use, he runs, she plays, is AD&D First Edition. No interest in getting AD&D Second Edition or Third Edition, 3.5, 4th Edition, Pathfinder, whatever. They've no interest. And the reason they've no interest is that that game works for them. When I come down, I don't have AD&D First Edition. I end up running games that I like to run. I've run Call of Cthulhu. I haven't run Cult yet. That could be fun. I'm due to run Star Wars for them. I've run Castle Falkenstein because I just have to. And they enjoy those experiences. They're different. I wouldn't say they're better or worse than the games they're having. They're different. And as long as the game works for you and your group, whether someone else in a different group disagrees with it, doesn't quite go with that, would do it another way, that's fine, because they can do it their way. That's the great fun about role-playing. We all bring something unique to the table. That's one of the lovely things about this hobby, is that it really does help encapsulate the individuality of the player or the GM involved. No two games will ever be the same. And that's the great thing about it. There's no real predictability factor, much, in a role-playing game. Certainly a lot less than a board game. So my answer to the question, which is better, old school or modern? From a personal preference, I prefer rules-light games. Now, I prefer rules-light games that are old school. I prefer rules-light games that are modern. I mean, I think Cinematic Unisystem is great. Cortex has some nice features about it. Savage Worlds is a very rules-light game and it's very simple. And those are modern games. But I don't need a rule for everything. I'm capable of coming up with stuff on the fly. I always have been. So it works for me. So I would say, get out there, enjoy your gaming, just game. We've got enough people poo-pooing us for God knows what and God knows how for our gaming. Just get out there and game. If it's old school, great. If it's modern, great. Don't worry about what the other guy's playing. If it interests you, go ahead. If it doesn't, don't. Just don't worry about it. Just do your thing. It's your game. Enjoy it.